Welcome to 50/50 Books, the book review podcast where the books are split in two, and figuring out just what is going on is always a toss-up. I'm Taylor.
And I'm Jonathan. It's December and winter is coming, so we are reading In the Winter Woods by Isabelle Adler, up to, but not including, Chapter 10. So we've got a cozy mystery and a bit of a romance, slow romance, but a romance. How are we feeling so far, Taylor?
It's been okay so far. I feel like it's not as I was going to say heavy-handed, but there's some weird, scent moments that I'm like, ugh, I don't really get it, but okay. But
Wait, some weird what moments?
Scent, smell.
Smell?
Declan brings up Monroe's, scent a lot.
Wow, I've not noticed that at all.
Oh, well, I have. So,
yeah.
I guess it's fine then if you're not noticing. And I just am, because I always do, I guess.
Kind of bothers me that I didn't notice, though. I'm like, why didn't I notice that?
It's been, maybe about 3-ish times, so not that many, but of course we've only read 130 pages, so
yeah,
I'm thinking it's a good amount, but
no, I guess it's a romance thing. I really didn't notice that. I will say, as far as me saying that it's slow, it's I kind of almost expected they were already going to be together by the midway point of the book, honestly. So yeah, I thought it was more of we know what's happening here, so we're gonna get into it, as opposed to we want to sizzle this till the end of the book,
Mm-hmm. I will say it's very, a very mature romance.
Yeah.
Not in, the sexual way, but in, they both are dealing with their emotions very well, I guess, is the way to put it. I mean, other than Declan, he's a little bit silly, but, Monroe is kind of this is not a good idea because you're a murder suspect, so we need to pump the brakes here.
Yes.
But yes, I am bisexual, and yes, I am very handsome, I understand. And I'm good.
Yeah, I agree. So I will say, for getting into a romance, we always have our skepticisms, but I agree that it has not been bad so far. I wouldn't say it's the most complex thing, but I think that's maybe for the better, honestly.
Mm-hmm. But let's just start at the beginning, I suppose, of everything.
Yeah.
In which we kind of start off and hit the ground running. Everything happens very quickly, which makes sense for a very short book. But we get kind of the rundown of what's going on. Declan is an author who is living in Manhattan, or he was, which is crazy to me. But
I agree.
I guess people do it.
It's very Carrie Bradshaw.
Yeah. He's published 10 books, apparently, if I'm remembering correctly. So he is a substantial author.
Mm-hmm.
He has hit some writing block, though, as happens.
As it happens, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, and so he needs to kind of get away to his old family's cabin in Maplewood, Vermont. Is it Maplewood?
Yeah,
I can't remember.
I didn't even check if it was a real place, but yeah, Maplewood sounds right. And it feels like the classic thing, right? Writers retreat up to a woodsy, naturey place. The winter vibes are kind of nice too, so I get it.
I will say it's a little insane for him to go to this summer house, basically, is how he describes it. And he has electric, he has water, but he doesn't have any heat.
Which is nuts.
Which is crazy. I feel like you would die. He has a fireplace, but I'm that's not good enough, sir. I don't know how you could get any work done when you're freezing your ass off. It sounds miserable.
I feel like he kind of makes the point that he knows he's probably not actually going to get work done, though.
Yeah.
He's I'm kind of, I do want to use this. He seems really serious at the beginning. I want to use this to yes, maybe fix the writer's block, but also be a little introspective and try to improve my life a little bit. Which are valid things that don't look like work all the time, but I think he does kind of acknowledge after he gets there, he's there's kind of a lot of distractions and that might be okay.
Yeah, I think he's still battling with the understanding of just because you're a writer doesn't mean you can just write. Sometimes you do need to take a step back and just let something breathe and give yourself time to be inspired by things. Right. He's still thinking of it as procrastination, but his attempt at writing where he just sits down and writes a prologue and hates it, I feel that's a wild way to write something. I don't understand people who can just sit down and write without a thought in their head and then somehow produce something. I don't understand how that
without
works.
planning or anything ahead.
And then he does try to plan something later, outline, but that doesn't really work out for him either. So yeah, he is trying grappling basically with the I should be writing, so I feel guilty I'm not writing, but also I can't write anything, so I need to give myself time to not write things. And
Yeah.
I mean, luckily for him, we get a murder investigation, so.
Right. Which is hopefully going to reinvigorate his writing career.
He brings up the idea of writing a true crime to kind of get information, but I don't think that's actually what he's going to do. I could see him just writing like a mystery or like a cozy mystery like this book ends up being.
Right.
So.
I was going to say it feels one of the cases where maybe they're referring to the book that we're reading right now.
Yeah, I could see
which
that.
in a sense would be a true crime book for him, I guess, but it doesn't have that vibe writing style wise.
Yeah, because I think he's like very sarcastic gay seems to be his character, and a little bit grumpy, and he worries about that throughout the book. And so I think it makes sense if he ends up writing in a genre that's a bit more like cozy mystery and like lighthearted and like has romance to it, especially if he ends up finding romance at the end of this book, which he probably will.
He probably will.
So.
Yeah. All right. So Declan's plan for an idyllic retreat doesn't go as he thought. He starts receiving some threatening notes made from not writing, but instead magazine clippings, where the letters have been pieced together to say what the threat of the day is. And I think he gets the first one pretty early on, too.
Surprisingly early. Nothing has happened yet.
Yeah, so the first one, I'm trusting your quote here. The first one just says, "Get out or die," which is very direct, I feel like, as a threat. And he brings this over to not the police officer, because there's no police in this town. They're I forget what they call him, like what he's the commissioner of, like public safety.
Yeah, public safety commissioner.
Just feel like that's still a cop, but anyway, he brings it to the public safety commissioner, Monroe, who like totally brushes it off as anything of importance, even though it literally says the word "die" on it.
Yeah, he thinks it's just a prank, which I mean, understandable. You live in a small town, whatever. But like, I thought it was strange because Declan is a famous writer, like famous enough that Janice, who lives in this small town, like knows him and reads all his books. Even Monroe reads all his books.
I was gonna say like, Monroe, and I think Martha comes out at least knowing who he is. Like, it seems like everyone knows who he is and he's here.
Right. So having some type of fame and then receiving a note like this when you're living like alone in the woods, are we not worried that he has stalkers, like, or crazy fans or like something? Like, I feel like he should be worried about this from this angle.
I guess you'd keep tabs on it, but what do you do? At what point does it become an investigation versus just like a thing you keep track of?
Yeah, it doesn't help that Declan kind of waltzes in and is like, "You're gonna do fingerprints on this, right?" And it's like, okay, buddy, calm down.
Yeah, a little presumptuous.
Yeah, that's a little crazy.
My other thought with this note, just because it seems not only do people know who he is, but they know the content of his work, meaning that they know he writes about a gay main character, that this was like a homophobic thing, like that will have nothing to do with the murder at all. And I'm not sure if I still believe that with things that happen later on, but it is possible that it's separate from the murder, and this would make sense as a potential reason, is like people know he's gay before he even gets there. He shows up. Someone in this small town might not want him there, you know?
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't even think about that. Yeah, I guess small town, you do have to be worried about, being gay. They do have, like, a bisexual public safety officer, though, so I'm like...
That's the thing. It sounds a little bit, though, like he's like, it's not a secret, but I'm not, announcing it to the world, so I wonder how many people know it.
Right, especially if he had an ex-wife.
Yeah.
Definitely straight passing there, sir.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I kind of hope it's not that, because I, like, don't like reading gay books that have a main homophobic plot line in them, but and I think it's probably not that, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, I think there's like two different mysteries, like main mysteries going on with this book. I don't know if that sentence made sense, but let's pretend it did. So yeah, I don't know if like an extra homophobic note person could be tacked on. I feel like that'd be too many things going on. So yeah, I think
agree.
it would be interesting, but yeah, I don't know either.
He is looking hardcore for some sort of evidence that Porter also received some sort of notes and isn't really finding it, though. So that's like another mark against them being the same thing.
Yeah. Well, okay, I will say the second note he ends up getting with like the rock thrown through his window, very cliche, is a note that says "Get out while you still can," and that one definitely sounds more like a warning, and it
Hmm.
also kind of makes the first one sound a bit like a warning as well, like something is going to happen, and so you need to get out, or something will happen to you type of situation.
Like you're saying, when you say warning, you mean this person might not be the person who's going to do something to Declan, but they know something about it.
Yeah, I was thinking, and this I can go into more later, but like whoever killed Porter, if somebody knows about that, because I think it was like premeditated,
Hmm.
then Declan being there could cause him to be a suspect or like put him in danger. And so this person is trying to warn him away from that
Right.
because it's possible whoever killed Porter will think that Declan knows something, or we'll see Declan investigating, and then so Declan is now also in danger for a multitude of different reasons. So yeah, I
Hmm.
think the Porter situation has like two people that know about it rather than just one murderer.
I'm having a thought that I didn't have before we wrote these notes.
Oh,
I'm just gonna say it, I guess. It may be getting ahead a little bit, but that really makes me think of like Martha seems to want Declan to leave.
uh-huh.
Like is saying like, oh, like why don't you get a motel somewhere else or like get out of town or anything like that. And I didn't really suspect her husband, even though he was being kind of a grump because we didn't have enough information for me to feel that.
Mm-hmm.
But it would make sense that Martha is the one throwing the rocks through windows and like trying to imply that it's smart for Declan to leave if she knows her husband had something to do with this.
And I will say I've had a very similar thought.
Okay, good.
Yeah. But also that third note is left so this is like post murder, but that third note is left so aggressively. Like there's like the knocking that happens first, and then the kitchen knife is like a clear threat.
Mhm.
So if it is like Martha and Evan, this note might actually be left by Evan instead.
Oh, interesting.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves
Sorry.
though.
That's a
Let's
good
like
point. That's a good
I
point.
think we do have a section where we want to kind of talk about all the suspects. I do think they're like the strongest, but we can get into all of their history, whatever, because I have a few things going on that I think are relevant. But um let's rewind for a second
Yes,
and go back
yes,
to
yes.
that second
I
note.
got excited.
I know. I do think we need to talk about Monroe a little bit, I guess. Monroe and Declan.
Yeah.
So let's shelve murder and let's talk about romance. I'm still not sure how I feel about Monroe. I like him. I think I can't tell if he's like a flat character or a kind of colder, not cold, but
Yeah. Like reserve?
like reserved would be a good way. Reserved character, cuz he comes across kind of like that through like I don't know. I just can't get a good read on him, I guess is what I'm
I think he's
saying.
just like a cop type, right? Like he's a little detective-y. He knows to not get like not to put too much of himself out there.
Right. Okay.
And so yeah, I think that's like why I agree with you. Like he is a little hard to read and understand. And at first I was tempted to be like, I feel like he doesn't have much of a personality, but I really don't think that's the problem because when he does start sharing about himself, it's like, no, I don't think that's what's happening here. I really do think he's just like trying to be a professional.
Okay. Yeah, cuz I like want to like him, and I do think I like him cuz he is like reserved and stuff, but I was just like it was just hard. It was hard for me to kind
Mhm.
of get a good read on him. And then Declan is obviously so interested in him for some reason that it wasn't clicking at first, like
Mhm.
what about Monroe was interesting other than the fact that he's like hot and he smells good. Um but like yeah, during the
Yeah.
second note they do have like that sharing session.
The reason why I said it feels slow at the beginning is because it doesn't feel like it feels like they're making moves certainly, but like it doesn't necessarily feel like they've gotten close by any means.
Mm.
And I don't think there really is anything there yet that they can be like definitely like I like this guy. Like it does seem quite hesitant beyond like yeah, like curiosity and interest. Like this is very much the dating stage that they're about to approach. Like not the we're in love, not the relationship. Like they very much like need to go on dates with each other still. So I think that's and I think that's okay. Honestly, that's like shockingly normal. I would say.
Yeah. my main issue with romance is it is so fast and intense, and usually uses like sexual interest as like a way to accelerate that relationship, I guess. But in
Right.
this, they really are like some normal dudes in their 30s that are kind
Yeah.
of getting to know each other, and it's so normal. And it's like so weird, but like in a good way, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I thought they were gonna sleep together in chapter 4, and I'm glad that's not what happened.
Thank God. I would have been so upset if they did.
Yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure.
But yeah, Monroe, after the second note and after their entire sharing situation, is a lot more understanding. I mean, obviously a rock got thrown through a window and like somebody is about to be murdered or has been murdered. I can't remember. So he's taking things a lot more seriously. He's like, you probably shouldn't stay at the cabin. It's dangerous. And Declan's like,
Reasonable.
yeah, reasonable for Monroe. But Declan wants to be a contrarian and he's like, I can't leave. That's what they want. And I'm like, you, sir, please. You're in the middle of nowhere, but
Yeah.
it's fine, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of stupid. Like I could understand it a little bit. Like I almost feel like Monroe did this to him because after the first one, he's so dismissive of it that I think Declan gets in his head to kind of behave that way too. And so now these other ones start coming in, and he starts dismissing them, which is a bad idea. But Monroe is being kind of true to his word of saying, okay, if there's more, then we'll be concerned, and then there's more, and then he's concerned. But now Declan's not really cooperating with the same thinking.
Yeah, I also think there's that obvious part of Declan that wants to perform. Like, he kind of wants to seem cool and adventurous, and I think he is a little bit, but like, he thinks of these moments where he could run out into the woods and like search for the person who's doing this, like his main character Owen would do, and like do all of these intense things, and that for like his own benefit, and also I think maybe to impress Monroe a little bit is probably also what he's thinking.
I was thinking that too. Yeah.
So yeah, I think there is that dismissiveness, and then also just like I need to be cooler in this scenario than just like running away, basically.
Yeah.
But it's like, it's ridiculous
Yeah.
because like you could die basically, and nobody would be able to get to you fast enough because you are like so far away.
Well, and who's gonna know, really? And if he's unable to actively call for help, he's screwed. He's gonna be left there.
Yeah, and with this last note especially, he like didn't call Monroe that night, even though clearly somebody was in the woods with a knife and like slammed on his door. Like, he was in danger, like,
Yeah.
different than all the other notes before. This is like actively somebody came up to the door and like put you in danger. And he still thinks about like running after the person, and like he doesn't do anything because at the end of the day he like realizes he's kind of a coward. That's not being a coward, for the record. That's being like smart and like thinking of your safety. But he doesn't call Monroe because he doesn't want to seem clingy or like needy.
Right.
And I'm like, sir, get a grip. Like, he is a public safety commissioner, police officer. He is supposed to keep you safe. This is his job.
Whole job.
It's his job.
Yeah, he's like deciding for him what he should be doing. I don't know. It's all bad news.
I mean, we get this promise of Monroe being like, you need to stop meddling, and then Declan is like, I promise, and then immediately starts to meddle. So it's definitely going to result in an end of the book we see kind of often, I think, in Cozy Mysteries, whatever, where Declan is going to end up getting himself in trouble with the murderer, probably, and then need to be saved.
For sure.
Yeah.
To go back just for a second, I had one nitpick I was having fun with that I wanted to share, which was when they were having their like sit down conversation the night of the murder. Monroe goes into why he moved to California and like how he had a wife from out there and then like moved back here, giving the whole backstory. And I thought it was kind of wild of him to be like, yeah, like I really wanted to go to Cal State LA. And this sticks out to me because of the way he talks about Cal State LA, which like if you've gone to Cal State LA, like good for you, college is good. I'm sure it's a fine school, but he was like, yeah, like I not only did I really want to go out of state, but like Cal State was a really good school, and when I was lucky to get in, so I had to go. Cal State is a school that's got like it's 87% acceptance rate. So unless things were different before or something, I was like, I don't know if like I would describe that as tough to get into, such that if you get in, you have to go. And generally, it's kind of seen as like a wild thing to go to a California public university from out of state because they have a lot higher tuition for out of state folks, of course.
Mm-hmm.
This part I did have to look into, and it turns out Cal State's tuition is pretty low, so it couldn't be that. But nevertheless, the fact that he went to Cal State LA is wild, and I couldn't believe it. I consulted a friend from California, and she was like, "There's a good chance that author meant to say UCLA," which then makes me think the only reason the author did this was to like fictionalize the universe a bit more and be like, in this universe, UCLA isn't the big good school in LA, it's Cal State, something like that. But I thought it was silly.
I can't believe you did research.
I did.
In which you talked to your friend about this.
I consulted resources, references and everything.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It was just such a wild area of the book to read, just having some knowledge of like the, California university system and being like, that doesn't seem normal.
Yeah, I could see like a world in which the author kind of just needed, it's kind of a throwaway thing, right? Like it's important to Monroe's character, but at the end of the day, you just kind of need a place, right? You need something. So you kind of just stick your hand in a hat and pull out a name, and then you kind of go for it. Yeah. It is surprising they just didn't go for like one of the most famous schools.
Like, why wouldn't you say UCLA is what I'm thinking, Yeah. The only reason I make such a big deal of it is I do think it would put some readers off of it, right? Like if you are familiar with California, or especially from California, and you read that, you might be like, this author didn't do their research, which might not be what it was, but that might be how it comes off,
That's crazy that you thought about that. I feel like there's a couple moments like that in this book, though. Like, not necessarily that the author didn't do research, but like that it might not necessarily matter, I guess. Like, you're supposed to read this with like hot chocolate and there's snow, so
not supposed to think this hard about it. Yeah
You went a little overboard, but that's okay. That's okay. You do have the resources, so I suppose it's worthwhile.
Yeah It was just fun to investigate. You're right, it doesn't matter. Like, these are really small details of the book, but I just was like, oh, this sticks out to me, like I want to talk about it.
Yeah, to be fair, that's what we're here for, to nitpick about everything. So I still don't know how I feel about that scene in general, though. Like, there is something tentative about their relationship that, we've talked about. It's kind of nice, but I'm always hesitant about like really open and like vulnerable scenes like this, because I'm like, when is the right time to have them? Like, is this too soon to like talk about all of this stuff? So I don't know. I'm trying to keep it in mind that this book is just short in general. Yeah. And also it's like a romance. So I think if it was like a different book, I might complain more about how open they're being in a way that doesn't necessarily make sense. But also, who am I to understand human condition, right? People do things because they want to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel like this conversation went crazy far. Also, like it was tempered, and I do think it characterized it. I should say it aligned with the characterization of Monroe as kind of like a straightforward type of person, because he was very matter of fact about saying all this stuff. He didn't really actually have reservations when he was saying it. He was just like plain about it,
That's a good point. Yeah, I think the only piece of like shared information that's been actually weird so far is like in the first 10 pages when Declan is like, yeah, my parents are dead. I'm like, do people just say that? I'm not really sure. Like, and to a stranger as well. It seemed a little weird, but
I mean, it's relevant because the people in the town actually might know his parents, right?
Yeah, I feel like that's like not their business though. Like, do you need to say they're dead? You could just be going to the family cabin. I'm nitpicking, as you can see, but like, yeah.
I think it's reasonable that he's sharing it with people. Honestly, I'm shocked it's not a bigger part of the book right now.
We have had some really interesting scenes in this, though, of like him obviously grieving still, which I'm a little surprised by.
Like, what scenes are you thinking of?
There's like certain scenes where he'll be like in the cabin and he'll be like thinking about kind of just the past, right? And like missing his family and that kind of stuff. And like it makes sense, his parents died only like a year ago or so. So it's just like it could be easy to have the parents be dead and like just not bring it up. either because he's avoiding it or because there's so much else going on. But the author does take moments to kind of just be like, yeah, this is the family cabin. Like, your family spent time here. And he's like still thinking about that. And that like understanding he kind of has, that he's kind of running from things still. Like, getting away here was to try and help his writer's block, but it was also to like run away in a way and like escape and do that kind of stuff. So like, I don't know, we're getting interesting insight into things I didn't expect to get.
Yeah.
Which is surprising. Just because of the length of this book. Like, it's...
Yeah,
I cannot understate how short this book is. Like, I read for this episode in like an afternoon.
Yeah.
Like a couple hours. It was nothing. But
I will say job. With that, like, the pacing is good. Like, I get what you're saying. Like, there's like drops of other things, maybe more complex thoughts that we're getting, that they feel balanced. I feel like there's some other books that like it's tough because when you drop information like that, if you say too much, it leaves me wanting more. So then you either end up in this space where you say too much or you say too little. And I feel like with that, like, the author has dropped in just the right amount, or like maybe I want to know more, but I'm not like hung up on it.
Right.
So I think reading it has been like, the flow has been perfect, and I don't think we're sitting on anything for too long. I don't know. Maybe there's, punchy isn't the right word, but like, there's something about it being short where you're going from plot point to plot point where it's just nice. I don't know.
Yeah. Declan makes a funny comment at like towards the beginning, I think, mentioning along with his writing, like, he's not somebody who writes purple prose or like likes purple prose, and I had a note that was just like, yeah, I get that, because this book is so not purple prose. It's like very almost minimalist, right?
Yeah. I like it. I almost prefer, I feel like if I were a writer, I'd be down this aisle.
Oof, I cannot relate. I am a purple prose person, but I understand the appeal. Like, it is definitely working in this book. It feels very like crisp.
Oh, crisp. What a good word.
Which I think also fits with like the winter vibe. Like, I don't know. Something about it is just really good.
Yeah, I like it. Should we move on to discussing other deaths?
I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, but there is a murder that takes place. I suspected he would be murdered pretty quickly when he basically was an asshole to everybody.
He was horrible, yeah.
Yeah.
I should have expected it, but I didn't. Like, he was a major ass, but I thought he'd maybe be the prime suspect of a murder case and not the murderee. So
that makes sense. Yeah. So we do end up spending an argument with Porter. I don't remember his first name. Frank? I don't remember.
Yeah, Frank.
Okay, good. He's obviously having some beef with the town. He's fighting with the mayor. He's fighting with the town manager. He's fighting with literally everybody, even Declan, who just showed up. And he's also like the richest guy in town, apparently. He owns a lot of property, I think is what it is.
Yeah, because they say he doesn't like necessarily live lavishly, but he owns a lot.
Yeah. And there seems to be something going on with the town. Like, they want to build a theme park, is what I'm understanding.
Yeah, so this came up at the very beginning of like the construction site of a theme park being identified on the main street, and I was like, that is bizarre for what the way they've described this town. And then it ended up being potentially a major point of the book, so I guess that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like a theme park museum, kind of.
It's like dedicated to the local lake monster Champ.
Yeah, if you're familiar with your cryptids, Champ is up there. And then they want to include like other cryptids, weird things, whatever. It's like kind of like a curiosity attraction,
right?
Which makes sense in theory. Like, you do want people to go to your town. Porter is like absolutely against it. He thinks it's gonna he thinks it's going to invite weirdos, basically, which honestly makes sense.
It will.
Yeah, it definitely will. So he's fighting against that, and he's also mentioning like corruption and like all of this weird stuff that's only mentioned a little bit when Declan overhears it. But we haven't really gotten into any of what that could possibly be yet. We're a bit more interested in his like secret son. That theory is really what we're what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah, I will say, though, I'm excited to learn what corruption he knew about, because I think this is going to be the sort of situation where we all hate Porter, but he was onto something.
Yeah, that's what I also felt as well. Like, he was an asshole about it, but he was right at the end of the day. Of course, don't be an asshole, but...
Yeah, and being an asshole is not... does not deserve death, a death sentence in response.
For sure. To be fair, everybody in this town seems to want him dead.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what makes it all complicated, right? Yeah, it's like everyone has beef with him. Or I should say he had beef with everyone, because it really sounds like he was the source of a lot of it, but...
Yeah, it seemed like he was a guy who had everything in this town and then did not want any of it to change, to the detriment of everybody in this town, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I could understand everyone's perspective there, where they're like, he's got all the wealth he'll ever need. Like, we really want, like, this theme park so that way we can sustain ourselves. Like, we need income, and tourists is really the only way to bring more money into our town. Like, I can understand them feeling like he was being unsympathetic to them. So that makes me even more wonder what was the reason he thinks it should be stopped.
Yeah, I think, like, if we're dealing with why he was killed, Monroe and Declan at this moment think it's like the secret son and like inheritance and all of that kind of stuff, but I really am leaning more towards whatever this corruption was is really why he was killed. So I think the son is just like a red herring type of situation. But yeah, I definitely think we need to get more into whatever's going on with that.
Yeah, I also had the brief thought, especially if it was like the mayor who made this happen, of like, if the mayor felt that the secret son was not going to be able to be identified, that I don't know how things work when people die without heirs, but I was like, is there a chance the city could get some portion of his estate if they don't identify heirs?
That's a good point. Yeah, it depends on what his will is, right? Because Porter obviously knew about his son and like kept some contact with Lucy, who was like his old high school sweetheart, I guess is what they were. So he has some connection to his son. He probably knew who his son was, I would assume. I don't know if... I feel like he would have to in some way.
Do you remember if they said how long she stayed in touch for? Because I do remember she does cut him off at one point, like that stops communicating. But also I thought she was only sending one-way letters. Like, I thought she didn't put return addresses on.
They were one way for sure. We do know Lucy and her family settled in Pennsylvania, and we did have a picture of Lucy and a kid. So, like, yeah, it's possible communication stopped after that, so it would have been when the son was a child that they ended up stopping. Because I would assume Monroe and Declan find all of this information. I would assume if Lucy had sent more pictures and more letters, Monroe and Declan would have found them. Communication must have been cut off before the kid ended up being a teenager. I'm assuming because we know the secret son and we don't want to know what he looks like yet.
And I do think we know who the son is. At least I
think
so. Yeah.
I think I know as well. Monroe briefly thinks it could be Declan, but then is like, that's crazy.
He is the right age. Like, I got it. I understood why he thought so.
It definitely makes sense. And it's obviously a lead he has to follow. But let's talk about suspects. Obviously, we do have Declan, who cooperates a lot, even though he's a murder suspect. He just casually gives his fingerprints, doesn't get a lawyer, doesn't talk to anybody.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about the not getting a lawyer thing.
Yeah.
That's a good point. I think he just wants to cooperate because he knows he didn't do it, right? He's like, well, like, I know my fingerprints are on things, like, let's identify them so someone else's fingerprints can be identified on them, too. It's risky, but I understand why he did it.
Yeah. There's just something about Declan thinking he knows what's going on, and, like, he obviously has an advantage because Monroe trusts him at least a little bit. But he makes some silly choices. If you ever get, taken in by the police and they say you're a suspect or don't say you're a suspect, you should get a lawyer.
Yeah, for sure. I will say, like, Declan doesn't seem to fully understand his relationship with Monroe in this case. Like, I think he assumes that Monroe is gonna special treatment him, and he doesn't, at least immediately, does not do that. Like, he does treat him as a murder suspect, and he's like, I thought we were friends now. And it's like, no, but, like, this is his job. Like, he does kind of have to treat you like a suspect first, given the situation. So I think he puts a lot of trust in Monroe that Monroe has maybe quickly lost for Declan.
Yeah, I think Monroe is exceedingly practical. And I will say, like, Declan does get a little bit hurt by it. It's like they do the first name thing, and then that seems to, like, disappear when somebody ends up dead. So, like, Declan's not sure what's going on, but they get back there eventually. They handle it very maturely. Like, Declan doesn't throw a fit. He doesn't, like, cut Monroe out completely. He's kind of like, okay, I understand what's happening here, which is nice.
Yeah, that was one of my notes, is like in another book, this is where they'd stop talking to each other dramatically.
Yeah.
And so I was like also impressed. Like, wow, like we're all being very mature about our feelings. Like we're acknowledging them and we're being adults about them.
Yeah. And they're still sharing information, really. Like, Declan isn't entirely trying to investigate on his own. I mean, he does, but, like, when Monroe catches him, he doesn't try to, like, hide anything, basically.
Yeah. I will say, I thought it was not smart of Declan to immediately start telling people that he wants to write a book about this stuff. Like, he basically immediately goes to Janice, is like, I'm going to write a true crime book about this, help me. And he knows that means the whole town is going to know about that idea. I know he gets kind of cleared, but I feel like suspicion could be cast back onto him as a result of that, because people would be like, oh my God, did he kill him just so he could have something to write about? And like, maybe framed someone so that way, like, he wouldn't get in trouble for it and he would have a book to write. Like, I think especially as an outsider, like, he could be pinned for that. So I wouldn't be doing what he's doing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because Monroe does mention that this murder, how it's done, does seem to be done in a way to make Declan suspicious, right? Like, it's done with Declan's family shovel, which will have his fingerprints on it. And then, of course, we have the notes, which make it seem like somebody else probably understands that as well.
He just needs to watch out, because he is the new person in town, right? Like, I'm thinking the person who did this murder is like, did try to frame him because he was new, because he saw an opportunity to be like, oh, there's a new person in town. He lives right next to Porter. What a good opportune moment to kill him and frame that new person.
Right. He also knows, the murderer also knows that Declan and Porter had an argument.
Right. I mean, it sounds like the whole town knows, honestly.
Well, yeah. But it's very clear that Declan is being made prime suspect. But obviously we know he didn't do it. I will. It's easier for everyone else to know he didn't do it, because the time of the murder is when Monroe and Declan were together. That gets confirmed. So that's helpful, because now Monroe doesn't just have to rely on trusting him. He's like, I know you didn't do it because we were together. So
yeah, but they do have to watch out still, though, especially if they do like start increasing interest in each other, that if people notice that and they suspect that it's Declan, that they would lose trust in Monroe.
Yeah, that's definitely something that could come up for sure. So Declan's obviously in danger. He's in extra danger because he's investigating when he shouldn't be. He ends up writing a list of who he thinks it could be, which is all characters we've already met, basically. We've talked about the mayor, who was having an argument with Porter, surprise. So it's possible, like, estate reasons, like you mentioned, could be why that happened, or even just whatever corruption was going on is why the mayor did something. It's not a terrible idea. I think for the mayor and for Atwood, who's the town manager, that's kind of the only reason they have to do it so far, which is a fine reason, but we haven't gotten enough of them for me to think it's them.
I hear you. I mean, there is that point at which I think we're going to get to anyway of Porter is able to stop things from happening. It seems somewhat single-handedly, because he's the chair of some committee. So I'm wondering if, like, with that, it seems like he was unable to stop the theme park, but I wonder if he's causing additional barriers to what they want to do, that they were like, yeah, maybe if we just got rid of him, we wouldn't have to worry about those anymore.
Yeah, I feel like the mayor and the town manager are both, I think, around the same age as Porter. I think. So I'm like, if they were going to kill him, why wouldn't they just do it sooner? Is what I'm feeling with those ones. I don't know.
That's fair. They've been dealing with him for a long time.
Yeah, it just doesn't feel like we have enough about them in general to really, like, we haven't had any conversations post-murder with these characters. So it's hard to know, like, how they're reacting, how they're feeling. So I don't know. I just don't think they did it.
No, that's fair. But I've got my eye on them. I want to know what they're up to.
Definitely. Obviously, like, if we're investigating town corruption, we might end up kind of exposing them in some ways as well. So not necessarily that they're the murderers, but it might be more than just a murderer that gets kind of arrested at the end of this book.
That'd be cool, actually. That'd be a cool ending.
Yeah.
So there's Haley and Logan Davis. There are a couple of reasons they may be connected to this story. So on the Logan end, Logan's like a little shifty about his background, but he does mention that he came to Vermont via Philadelphia, which, if you don't know, is in Pennsylvania, which means that there's a good chance that he's maybe not being totally honest about why he ended up in Vermont, or even if he is, then like either way, he might be the mystery son that we were talking about with Porter earlier. I think he's probably, my assumption is that he's probably in Vermont because he found something out about his father and wanted to make his way up there. But then, of course, he mentions while he's there, he ends up falling in love and sticking around longer than he expected. So with Haley, his wife, Porter has stopped her from being able to get a permit she needs, or I guess that they need for their car fixing business. So she's got beef with him. She's very open about the beef that she has with him in the shop, too, while Declan is there.
The interesting thing about the entire garage scene is Haley is very vocal that she like hates Porter, but Logan is more hesitant. Like, he doesn't say anything negative about Porter. He's like, you shouldn't say that. Like, he's just very weird during that whole conversation, which, yeah, I think definitely makes him secret son. And I think the Philadelphia thing is like basically confirmation, to be honest. But yeah, I don't think Logan would ever kill Porter. So that's why I think the secret son angle for the murder just doesn't make sense. Like, it's not going to end up being that. I do think Haley, there's a world in which it does, in which Haley does kill Porter, and Declan dismissing her is like him being silly so that we could have the plot twist later in which she actually did do it. That could be an angle. And then I think it could make sense for Logan to be the one leaving the notes, like saying, you know, you need to leave because, you know, my wife is going to do something. Right. And like him being very loyal to his wife, but also being like, I don't want Declan to get wrapped up in this. Because in the garage, we kind of get a conversation of, you know, Declan saying, yeah, he's my neighbor and we had an argument. And like, so the Davises know all of the things that happened. So it would make sense that they could use him as a scapegoat, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not tempted to believe that this was enough for her to want to murder him. So
I agree.
That kind of on its own counts it out.
Yeah, I also think if Haley knows Logan is related to Porter, not sure yet, but if she does, I don't know if she would go out and kill him.
Oh yeah, that is a thought that crossed my mind too. Is like, I'd be shocked if, whether or not she knows, honestly, if Logan would just kind of stand by while it was happening. Like, I don't think him sending the notes makes as much sense anymore, because I think he wouldn't be like trying to save Declan. I think he'd actually be trying to save Porter. Because my assumption is he's there to try to get to know Porter. Like, maybe he never even acknowledged that he was his son, but maybe he knew that he was his son and was just like, I want to like go to the town where my father lives and like be closer to him, even if he doesn't know I'm his son. And so I can't imagine that would lead to him being okay with murder.
Yeah, I think that's the angle we're going with here. I think that's helped because Monroe and Declan are so focused on the secret son. It just makes me think that entire thing is more red herring than like actually what happened. And then yeah, Logan just seems so chill, and Haley is upset, but I mean, everybody seemed to be upset.
Yeah,
maybe we'll get something more shifty when we see them again and talk to them again. But like at the moment, I don't know. She just seems kind of like everybody else in the town.
Yeah. I will say I did not appreciate Declan's approach to counting her out, because he does it to two characters. He does it to Janice too, where he's basically like, this character's too dainty to bludgeon someone to death. Which I mean, I disagree with on principle. I think most adult humans with a shovel could bludgeon someone to death with the element of surprise as an advantage, right? Because that's why one uses a weapon, right? Is to kind of help you out with the things you might not be able to do on your own. So I just thought, like, to brush people off and be like, basically it felt like a little bit like, oh, they're women, so they're not going to do it. To like brush them off because of physical ability, I think was a bad reasoning.
Yeah, I think for Haley, for sure. I think Janice is like the same age as Porter, or like around there, so she's old. So I can understand not assuming her.
I still think it's pretty possible, though.
I just feel like the amount of force to bring a shovel down on somebody's head and kill somebody. Also, I don't know why this whole time I've been assuming it's like one of those plastic snow shovels. I guess it's a metal shovel,
I
isn't it?
definitely was thinking metal shovel, but I get why you'd say that because he was looking for it for snow.
Right. Okay. Well, if it's metal, I guess that makes more sense. Haley for sure could do it.
He's like, oh, like Janice has a very firm handshake, but like her wrists are too thin to do this. I'm like, I don't know, man. I think the handshake says a lot more than her wrist does. Not that I think Janice did it, but I'm just like, let's not count people off on this.
It'd be crazy if Janice was like
that
the secret
would be
one.
crazy. She's kind of my favorite right now, so I hope not.
Wild. Yeah, so obviously the Davises are involved in their own way, but I think there's a couple that's a little bit more likely to be our killers, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of got into it a little bit earlier. It seems like Martha and Evan may be some prime suspects in the situation. You know, Evan, we only really interact with him once, but he's kind of just an uncomfortable person to interact with. It seems like he's like super intense, and like it makes Declan feel like, is this guy like, are the things he's saying to me threats? Like, why is he speaking this way? Like, the way he talks is just very like, I don't know if dark is really the right word, but like it seems unfiltered in a way. So that kind of gives a bad vibe around him. When he was behaving that way, I didn't really suspect him myself, just because it felt like he was so obviously disgruntled. Like, it felt like too much for him to be the murderer. Like, this would be too obvious. But there's some things that changed my mind, you know, like especially with like Martha's behavior around Declan, you know, wanting to kind of shoo him out of town. And I don't know, she seems concerned. I feel like concerned is not the right word, because she doesn't seem obviously concerned behaviorally, like emotionally maybe, but the things she's saying give off concerned.
Yeah, I think Evan does feel very obvious in the way that he's like threatening and like seems to hate Declan for no reason, which is a little weird. But I don't know, part of me thinks like we're just getting to the point. I don't know.
Yeah.
I also think if like Evan has been scoping out kind of the area still, like he's obviously still in the woods. If he's the one that sent the third like threatening message, he's still in the woods. He's still seeing what's going on. So it's possible he sees Declan not leaving and also investigating. Especially if he knows the Janice thing, right? Like Janice has told everybody that Declan is writing about what's happened. Then that could be somebody looking into the town, and he doesn't want somebody to look into the town. And so Evan is like very hostile towards Declan for still being there. And then Martha is feeling a similar way because she obviously doesn't want the truth to come out, basically. I think it has something to do with like their farm, their like maple farm or whatever they have going on, because that seems to be a point of pride for them. Evan works the farm, and then Martha is like, our maple syrup is like the best around type of situation. So they're also kind of wealthy, it seems like a well-known name.
I forgot about that.
Yeah, if some dealing or some corruption was going on, I wouldn't be surprised if their names were wrapped up in it, having to do with their farm or something like that. And it seems like Porter also is like quite hostile towards Martha. I can't remember exactly what he says, if it's something like specific. I think he just says like go cook in the kitchen or like something weird. But I don't know. She does get like pointed out in his like tirade type of situation. So they obviously have beef. That doesn't mean much. He has beef with everybody, but I guess we should note it anyway.
If this is the route this book is going, if it's Evan that's the murderer, like I am of the opinion that Martha was not in support, and that she's really just like trying to she's trying to control the sort of like whiplash, I guess, from the situation of like Declan being brought into it and potentially having his own life threatened or whatever it is. Like, I think she's just got like a ton of guilty knowledge. So I'm not tempted to believe that last note was from Evan. Like, I really think that was just Martha stepping it up, being like, let me scare him out of here, because if not, like, something bad will happen.
Yeah, there's also a major shift between Martha. Like, the beginning of the book, she's very nice to Declan. Like,
Mm-hmm.
she knows who he is. Like, she's friendly, all of that kind of stuff, which could be a front, but I think she's kind of just like that anyway. But then,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, after the murder happens, and I think after the Janice conversation as well, she's closed off, she's distant, like, she's not as friendly. And she does do that thing where she's like, she asks if he's leaving, and she's like disappointed that he's not. So she could, yeah, be like upset that he's investigating and also trying to like protect him in a way as well.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to like manage both of these things at the same time while like keeping whatever's going on probably with their farm under wraps, and then also protecting her husband. So like,
Yeah.
it makes sense her character shift that way.
I'm also like, maybe she's not protecting her husband though. Like, maybe she's like, the more time you spend here, the easier it's going to be for my husband to pin it on you.
Oh,
And I don't want that to happen.
yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, he seems like a bad person, so I'm like, maybe she doesn't like him.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think the farm belongs to her family, or like
Mm,
at least the diner might. So maybe it is like he did something because he thought it was the best, and now she is trying to save her family reputation, right? And like her name and like all of that kind of stuff.
for sure.
I might be misremembering, but I feel like that would make a lot of sense. Yeah, not necessarily that she's protecting Evan, but she's trying to protect herself and then also Declan at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like that. It makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I feel like that's like front runner murder suspects, though.
Yes,
is like
for sure.
those two.
I'll be impressed if it's not them, though, for sure, because, yeah, it does seem the most likely.
Yeah, I feel like we're gonna get a lot of information in the second part where that makes us think it might be somebody else, like probably more about the mayor and Atwood and all
That's
of them.
true, yeah.
I would put money on it being, I was gonna say on Evan, but I don't know. Martha might switch up a little bit more, and
Yeah,
it makes
who
me
knows?
nervous.
Who
But
knows?
the Duttons, I think in general, and then obviously Logan, secret son. I think we can agree on that.
For sure.
Yeah, I think that's basically everything to talk about. Kind of to the point. This book is to the point. Our thoughts have been, I think, very cohesive for the most part. I don't know.
Look
Don't
at
quote
us.
me on that.
Yeah.
I guess I'll figure it out when I edit this episode. But I guess we'll have to see what happens in the next part and spend our holiday season with these holiday boys. It's like we planned it.
Yeah, I think the second episode's coming out the day after Christmas, so that's fun.
Oh my gosh, that's perfect. So obviously, if you have your own thoughts and theories, the Twitter is 5050_books. We also have the YouTube and the Goodreads, and everything's in the description. Next episode, we're just finishing up this book and finishing out the year, and that's crazy to think about. So I guess we'll see you next time.
All right, bye-bye.